Welcome to the 2014 edition of the Scholars Forum. This year we're focusing on transitions, which can mean transitions between one stage of the writing process to another, or it can mean transitions from one kind of writing, one document to another. So today we're delighted to have Dr. Eric Lee with us. Dr. Lee is a professor in the Faculty of Management here at UBC Okanagan, and he specializes in global consumer culture and marketing. He has numerous peer-reviewed publications, and he's here today to talk to us a little bit about his writing process. Welcome, Eric.
Okay, thank you for having me here. So let me just introduce myself briefly. I joined UBCO campus in 2011, and I was a lecturer in the very beginning because I'm still working on my PhD thesis. And the second year I got my PhD, and then I became an assistant professor of marketing here.
So you've been through a transition already on campus.
No.
I'll start with an easy question. What kinds of writing do you do? What do you write about?
When I'm doing my PhD for that, it's pretty much focusing on my thesis and also the academic audience, and let's say going to submitting my manuscript to peer review conferences or peer review journal articles for that. But when I become an assistant professor at UBCO for that, I have more audience and not just like limited to academic audience. And the second type of audience is more like the grant foundation or institutions for that, because again, we are doing academic research. We need to have some funding to supporting our research. So I'm always in the process of preparing different grant proposals, from internal grant to external grant to federal grants for that. And the third type of audience I'm having is usually like professional service type of community member. And after I joined UBCO, especially since last year, I engaged myself in different interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary community-based projects for that. And so what I'm writing, I try to emphasize how research or university research can apply to community practices.
Often people find it hard to begin a writing project. So how do you go from that stage of idea or research into the actual writing process?
I start with the topics. I sometimes find some topics I'm really interested in or passionate, and then later on I just try to do some background research. So let's say how many researchers already did that research before and what approach they're using, what kind of theory they're coming out with that. So once I have that set of knowledge, and then I will start thinking, okay, what I can do, because I don't want to repeat what other people already did. So I have to find something new. Then I try to, again, in my office I have plenty of sticky notes for that, so I try to put a lot of sticky notes and try to map and keep changing the sticky notes for that and try to come up with a theoretical framework. Then I will start the actual writing. The actual writing usually start with the structure of the paper. So I try to lay out, okay, that's what I want to talk about in the introduction session, that's what I want to talk about in the literature review, methodology sessions, and if I already have some preliminary data for that, then I can think about how I frame the findings or discussion sessions for that. So once I have that structure, then I will start put the meat on the bones for that, and then start the actual writing process.
To come back to that idea of voice and audience, though, have you noticed that over the years here, I guess, that your voice or position that you're writing from has changed?
It's changing because as a PhD student, you're always thinking about you're the philosopher. You try to put all the academic jargons in your writing and try to make your writing become more complicated as possible, because, well, that's the academic world to some extent, which us to have this kind of like communication. But when I start writing the grant proposals and the professional report or working with the community member, I have to be careful in choosing the words I'm using and also positioning, because at the end of the day I have to emphasize that's the benefits to the community, that's the values my research can bring on the table. Compared to academic research for that, we are in the knowledge building community, we are serving a relatively smaller group of academics. So what my writing is trying to really write to someone know my topic really well, because it's a peer review conference of peer review journals. But the other side of my writing is trying to make sure they don't know marketing or they don't know consumer culture, they still can acknowledge my research can help them to build a better future, or can integrate some of my recommendations to their actual practices.
And you bring up an important point. Often grant proposals are not for specialized audiences, and so it is important to write them in an accessible way.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're thinking about like the review committee and of this grant proposal, for that you will have different types of professors and industry people and reading the same proposal. At the end of the day, you're competing with many other proposals for that. So how you convince that that's the benefits you can put on the table is more important than how many jargons you put on in your proposal.
I also wanted to ask you about the transition you've experienced fairly recently from graduate student writing to professional academic writing. What are some of the changes you've noticed as you've gone through that transition?
Yeah, I think as a PhD student, for that you're more focused on how to do the job right. So you follow pretty much all the conventional type of thesis writing, dissertations writing, make sure you cover this and that and try to connect your point together and kind of emphasize, okay, that's the theoretical contributions to the academic community. Because in the university setting, why we are having the PhD program is building up the knowledge and also training the next generations of scholars. But after I finish my PhD, I do believe that and I have to keep building up the knowledge community in different ways, not just like through the academic writing. So I try to every time it's just like thinking about what's new I can bring on the table, and what I can help is not just like focusing on the theoretical contribution, but also focus on the methodological contributions. So can I do some innovative research which can maybe helping the researcher or the community know more about the context. And the other is more like the practical implications. So how my research can really help in the community to build up their own business or their organization in the future.
I also wanted to ask you a little bit more about your writing process, how you go from different stages, and we talked a little bit already about how you begin a writing project, but how do you sort of continue and get to that stage of completion that we're all wanting to achieve?
And so once I have the structure, and I'm pretty good in come up with the first draft, so I can put together something together probably in a week or two. So it's a full-length manuscript for that. But I think one of the most challenging part for junior scholar is just I spend quite a bit of time to come up with the first draft, but we always find that, okay, wow, I want to keep this, I want to keep that. But what I learned now is just okay, I have to expect the second draft is I only keep maybe 20% or 30% of the first draft. So I have to make a decision to say, okay, I have to chop these components off. Because at the end of the day, there's no perfect draft in the very beginning. We have to make sure, okay, we write the and we thinking about the positioning of my manuscript and what kind of audience, what kind of changes, what kind of theory, what's new on the table for that. So it takes more than a couple months to revise, or having the final version is coming out for that. But it's more talking about persistent, so you keep writing piece by piece, keep changing. I usually what I do is just the beginning of the day, I try to have at least 1 hour, maybe 2 hours before I start checking my emails or start my morning coffee for that. But I just want to just sit in front of my computer, read one session on my paper. So I'm not going through the other session because I don't have time. 2 hours is not enough to go through a 10,000 word paper. So I just focus on the one session and try to do some editing or revise for that. And then the next day I will focus on the other sessions or keep working on the same session for that. So I find it's more effective in a way because just every time you give yourself multiple small tasks rather than you set a goal for that. Okay, within 5 days I have to finish the revision for that. To some extent, it's mission impossible because I have to teach and have other services on this campus, but that is hard to have 10 hours per day just contribute to writing.
So you have to schedule almost writing time into your day.
Yeah, but building up a routine is important. So I try to make sure weekend I'm kind of like cleaning up some of the project or spend some time with my family. But Monday to Friday, I have to make sure I have some good hours for writing, which is no distractions, no emails, no text messages, and no phone call at that time for that. 2 hours actually is my experience is I can I can get a lot from that process for that. But it's more a matter of consistent, because you can't, if you do it 1 week, the next week you go back to the normal or go back to the other routine for that, then it's not consistent. So that might be the challenge for junior faculty. It's just you always jump into different things for that and not keeping a really regular writing routine.
But certainly research shows a writing habit like you're recommending
Absolutely.
is an important part of productivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric, thank you very much for being here today. That's excellent advice. And thank you for joining us. Please feel free to view any of the other Scholars Forum videos on this site.